Welcome to the second episode of Be Extraordinary. The first episode, the pilot episode, we discussed what separates the average from the extraordinary. It was a very high level understanding of why you require your purpose, mindset, and your practice to be aligned for you to understand the pursuit of or understand the path to being extraordinary from average. You also said that there is no such thing as average, but there is a way to become extraordinary. Now, and like I told you last week, I wrote down a set of questions that I wanted to discuss with you in the same space. For anybody who's starting their career or somebody who's stuck in their career, being extraordinary is a very lofty vision, lofty ideal. It's not something it's not a switch that you can suddenly turn on and become extraordinary. Therefore, there are lots of building blocks that need to be put together for us or them to understand how they can take it forward. And the idea is that to make everybody extraordinary, it is possible. Now, in that, the first question that I had written down was, everybody is looking for professional success at some level. Now, some people achieve their professional success from a job perspective. Some people become extraordinary from a career perspective, and more often than not, the extraordinary achievers or the performers are the ones who more often than not have a career perspective to life rather than have a job perspective to life. So that warrants the fundamental question of how do we approach professional success through, what is the difference between approaching it through a job lens and what is the difference between approaching it from a career lens?
That's an excellent question, Ashwin. Not often I'm asked this question because very few people understand the difference between a job and career, and many a times one mixes job and career, and we use it very, very loosely, right? Because people say, this is the career I'm offering you, and you may be actually applying for a job, correct? So clearly, the ones who are extremely successful, and when you're looking at it from a professional success lens and a professional fulfillment lens, okay, they seem to have understood in my own conversations with people, right, across the podcast, across geographies, globally, whom I have spoken to. There's a certain sense of how they look at their career and how they do the job that they are doing just now, right? So a typical difference between a job and a career is, a job is something that you do at a point of time for which you are earning some money, right? So therefore, you may actually, finish your graduation, you may join and, as a technical engineer, or you may be joining as a marketing executive, or you may be joining as a management trainee in an organization. So that's a job that you are actually getting in, and you're being paid for it, right? Most often the job entails you to deliver on some particular short-term objectives, right? But a career is a little more larger canvas, right? So the person joining that particular job has to have a imagination of what that person wants to be in 15 years, in 20 years, in 30 years, and therefore what are the portfolio of skills that are needed to achieve that career success. I think that's really where I think the difference between looking at what you're doing today through a job lens versus looking at it from a career lens is different. That I think is the key. So a career, when you look back, is almost looking at one's life's journey, okay? One's life journey, right? While a job is about what you're doing today, what the role that you are actually being assigned, and are you doing that task well? I think that's the difference between looking at it from a job lens and looking at it from a career lens.
Got it. Therefore, job is the immediate understanding of what your role is, what your designation is, what your compensation is. It is today's problems, tomorrow's. It's a very short-term thing. But career is more, like you said, a life journey. Therefore, you need to have the imagination. You need to have a vision for your career. Correct?
Exactly. Let me explain it with a simple example. Okay. Let me take a finance and accounting professional, right? You may be a chartered accountant or a company secretary, and you might have joined an organization in the finance department, right? And you may be an accounting executive or you may be a finance executive, whatever may be your designation. That's the job that you've got. So there are certain role that you need to play for that job, right? But that person, when they join that particular job, has to have a larger vision saying, okay, do I want to be the CFO of an organization? Correct? So when I actually start having that imagination, saying that I want to be the CFO of an organization, right? Then what happens is the specific skills that are required for the job that you have been hired for, okay, is really something that is being looked at and you're being screened for it, and therefore you are joining there, right? But when you have a vision for yourself and an imagination saying I want to be a CFO, right, then there are a portfolio of skills that you need to be ready for, which the current job may not need you to learn, right? So therefore, for example, if I'm a CFO, I need to know how to manage my board. I need to know what funding is all about. How do I raise funds, right? I need to ensure that I look at industry trends, forecasting. What does it take to put investments in multiple geographies? I need to understand about various industry growth rates. How are companies growing in different geographies? You may need to have a larger view of how you actually have to make your money grow for the company, right? So when you have to have that perspective, maybe your first job may not allow you to actually have that perspective, but that does not mean that these portfolio of skills are not needed for your career to be a financial controller or a CFO, right? Therefore, if you understand these skills of how to raise funding, how to get into an IPO, how do you ensure that you look at industry trends and growth, how do I manage money, how do I manage board, how do I manage investors? These skills may be required 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 15 years from now, but you got to be an apprentice, learning it every day from the people who you look around, whom you may be reporting to or whom you may not be reporting to, right? So that, I think, is really about building a career roadmap versus having a constrained view of a job.
That's a nice point. No, a job view is always a constrained view.
Yeah.
Not doesn't mean it's a bad thing. A zoomed in version of your life is a job. A zoomed out version is a career.
Exactly.
Some people, unfortunately, owing to the circumstances they were born into or live, they always have only a job perspective, and so you'll see this person not growing in their life. You'll see other people, his peers, surpassing him or her and getting into larger roles and larger responsibilities. Therefore, and I don't know, but I have a feeling this is also an Indian thing of having a self-limiting belief. First, there are two parts of it. Do you think it's an Indian thing that having a self-limiting belief? Because for a large portion of us who are, I'm talking about the 35 plus crowd, for example, we are probably the first or the second graduate in the family, in the sense that we are either the first generation graduates or we are the second generation graduates. Very few of us are the third generation of graduates. Therefore, getting a good education, finding a job and being a good employee was the mindset that our parents always told us to. We were never, again because of our circumstances, we were expected to join a company and be an employee. Therefore, that became a self-limiting belief that this is what I should be doing. Now, my question to you is, do you think this is an Indian thing? And how does one person break the mold of having this self-limiting belief, having a job-constrained view and becoming a career-oriented professional?
See, I'm going to really look at it from a very, very different lens from what you're looking at, Ashwin. I don't think it is a self-limiting belief. If you start to dream and aspire, okay, and not worry about whether you will succeed or not succeed in your dreams, right, in your aspirations, I think that's the first step to take. But do you even have that aspiration? I think the first fundamental barrier is aspiration and ambition, right? I'm going to give you an example of somebody like, say, a legendary composer like, say, Ilayaraja. I'll take the South Indian example there, right? I think the first was his aspiration when he was in a village, and he was playing, in his brother's troop, I think, in his brother's troop, where it was called Pavala Brothers, and they were doing some, programs. And he had an aspiration to become a music director. That nothing stops him from having an aspiration, right?
Correct.
And many of us, I don't even think, have an aspiration first, right? So when you actually look at a job, the first question I would ask is, to get extraordinary, to be extraordinary, do you first have an aspiration, right? And the analogy for me is, did he know how to play the instrument? Did he know how to compose for a symphony? I don't think his thought process at that time was about actually saying, do I have these constraints? I think there was an aspiration, right? So the first step is to have an aspiration, right? If you don't have an aspiration, I don't think you will have this career view. You will probably have, I need to do something small and just be there, right? So therefore the first thing is about having that aspiration, right? Then what happened to him? He moved to Madras, now Chennai, right? And he actually was a guitarist with, an earlier music director called G.K. Venkatesh, and he was actually, earning his life by playing guitar for G.K. Venkatesh, who was a music composer. So the job that he had at that time was to play guitar for a composition that was composed by G.K. Venkatesh, and therefore he had to do that job very well, right? So therefore there's no question that he had to do the job very well to ensure that he earns his monthly salary, right? But that does not stop him. If you go back to his life, it did not stop him, right, from actually thinking, what does it take for me to be a composer, right? So he says that these are my portfolio of skills. So he said, these are my portfolio of skills that I need to have, right? Therefore, how do I learn Western music? How do I need to look at arranging an orchestra? Okay, how do I direct an orchestra? How do I learn Western music? How do I bring in different influences of music from different genres? He had to actually go back and start learning it. Whether it was needed for that day's job, definitely not. Right? But he then said, if I have to be somebody 10 years from now, 15 years from now, being a composer for a film production, I need to have this portfolio of skills. Right? So he went to Dhanraj Master, started learning guitar, right? Then started getting better at it, right? And therefore, was he going to use it in that particular job that he was actually doing every day? Not really. But what he really did was he went back and built all those portfolio of skills when suddenly one day he had the opportunity to direct for a movie in terms of music composition. He was ready with the portfolio of skills because he was then able to showcase his skill, and that, I think, is having a career focused mindset versus a job focused mindset. I'll give you another example. I'm going to give you examples so that it becomes what happens in real life, right? So let's take the example of Nitin Paranjpe. Okay, so Nitin Paranjpe more recently retired as the Chief Transformation and Chief People's Officer of Unilever. Okay, when you go back and study the history of Nitin Paranjpe, just go back to LinkedIn and look at his career. He joined 87-88 as a management trainee. Okay, that was the job that he got, right? It was an entry level job that he got to be, working in Unilever, and that's really where he started. It was called Hindustan Lever at that time, right? But if you dissect and look at, what probably made him reach where he reached by, the year 2025, he's got about 37 years of experience today.
Yeah, I'm just looking at his
Right?
profile here. Yeah.
Yeah. He went back and said, I want to be the best CPG executive in the world, right? Maybe that is the vision that he started to have, right? And then the jobs that he did was, he was an area sales manager, then he became a regional manager, then he became a brand manager, then he became a category head for personal care and home care, then he became an executive director, then he became the head of Unilever, right? Then he became the COO of Unilever out of London, right? And then he became a chief transformation and people officer. Now, if you look at all the skills needed to reach there, okay, he needed a sales skill, he needed a brand development skill, he needed to have category knowledge of how people buy brands and how people buy categories, and finally he ended up being a chief people's officer, right? So therefore, if you go back and look at where he started to where he ended up in his career, right? I would say the lighthouse or the anchor that he had was to be the best CPG executive or the professional in his life. Now, the way life took him was through various paths, right? Some around brand roles, some around regional sales roles, some around operational roles, some around category roles. And he had to prepare for all this as a part of the portfolio of skills to be the best to where he could get, right? Therefore, the aspiration is more important. The preparation comes next. And therefore, taking advantages of opportunities then become the next aspect of how your career then starts to build for itself.
So that requires a certain, like when you try to create or have a vision, therefore you need to have a great imagination of where things will be, where you will be, where there will be an overlap of what you're doing and with what is required in the industry. That takes great courage also, correct?
No, it takes courage. Let me tell you what kind of courage is required. The courage to experiment. The courage to say no to opportunities that may look interesting and probably giving you a lot more money in the short term. Right? Therefore, you go back and say, no, as a part of building my career, this opportunity, though it may give me a lot more money, but it doesn't fall into the blueprint of how I want to build my career.
Correct.
So suddenly you don't jump from job to job. You don't say, hey, somebody is giving me a better designation. Somebody is giving me a higher pay package. Sure, those are important. I'm not saying they are not important. But if it fits into the career map and the portfolio of skills that you're building and you want to build, then you take up that role and that job, right? Therefore, what is important is the courage to say no sometimes and the courage to say yes when probably your skills are not tested, but it's actually, in the kitchen that you have been building, but you now have to apply it in the real world, right? So therefore, that's really the difference in how I see courage.
When a career professional has that courage, the opposite of that for somebody who is limited by the job, therefore is complacent. Is that correct?
See, I think complacency is not something that I normally want to use because it's a little bit negative, right? I would say being constrained and not having the imagination and therefore carrying a lot of blind spots. I would use the word blind spots, right? So therefore you are not having the roadmap and therefore you have a lot of blind spots. So you basically are doing what you're being given, you're happy with it, and there's a certain sense of what I call as, I'm happy with where I am.
Which is not wrong, correct?
Which is not wrong. So therefore, for example, there are lots of companies, I can tell you that they are called Mr. Dependables. They are extremely good at execution. Okay, you give them a problem and you tell them get this done, they will do it extremely well. Okay, and they probably are the people to go to in many companies.
Correct.
Right. So therefore, the most important differentiation I would say is, what is it that you want out of the job that you are doing? That's important, right? So therefore, if you have a career mindset, okay, then you have to say, you know what, these are the portfolio of skills that I need, therefore I have to prepare myself. Somebody else might say, you know what, I want to be the best at what I do. I may be an individual contributor, but I'm happy being where I am, and I will actually be the best at it. Let me give you an example. Let me take the example of I'll take an analogy of a music orchestra, right? Like say, let's take the orchestra example again. Not everybody needs to be a Zubin Mehta, right?
Correct.
I would want to compose. I want to run my complete orchestra with my compositions is what Zubin probably had a dream and an aspiration. But in his group, there are some great violinists, great saxophonists, right? Who are actually saying, I want to build and be the best in that instrument. Okay. So therefore, if I'm best in that instrument, I'm always sought after.
Correct.
Right? So which means that the fact that you got to be best in anything that you do is, I think, the first requirement that is there. Right? Therefore, in a job mindset, what happens is you are neither good nor bad at what you are doing. You're pretty much running it like, there is some movement that is there, and you are actually, flowing the way the wind flows.
You're not incrementally getting better.
You're not incrementally getting better. So therefore, what I find is the ones who are extraordinary have this portfolio of skills, they have the aspiration, and they are lifelong learners. Right? So they are lifelong learners saying, you know what, I need to get this skills. I know I'm not good at it, and I have my heroes. Right? So therefore, I know that, this person is extremely good at, say, how to raise funds. This person is extremely good at how they, look at dissecting, say, a balance sheet. Okay. Somebody might be extremely good at analyzing industry reports, right? Therefore, these skills become critical. I have my heroes for each of these skills. I go back, assimilate them, and then I start building my own roadmap for how I have to be the best CFO in the world. So therefore, most of them are lifelong learners, and the ones who probably have a constrained view are not lifelong learners. So they think that I've learned enough and I just need to extract some value of what I have learned. So they tend to chug along, and soon it hits them in their 30s and 40s when growth does not happen and what you earn does not commensurate with what you probably have as your competency.
They start losing relevance.
They start losing relevance.
So what you've said then, there's a nice balance, because if you have the what I call the self-limiting belief, what you said as blind spots, let's actually use blind spots, because somebody in a job has a blind spot versus somebody in a career has a vision.
Yeah.
So you are limited by a blind spot, you are unbridled by your vision. When you have a career, you have the courage. When you have a job, you are complacent, or you are not looking to expand. And when you have a career approach, you have lifelong learning, versus you lose relevance as a job. So if you feel this is for anybody out there who is a little confused with respect to where they are in life, if you seem to have a self-limiting belief, you have to introspect. That is also what our Micro Compass does so well. Even I took the test last week, correct? It helps you, it asks you questions that might look like that questions that will apply to everybody in the career sphere, but then the answers and the processing of that information into insights is what makes Micro Compass also a very personal thing. So therefore, you introspect, probably using the Micro Compass. You figure out if you have a self-limiting belief. You figure out if you are complacent in life, and if you are losing relevance, if you have blind spots, and therefore to make the transition to being a career oriented person, what are the tips or tricks or tools that you would suggest? Like, for example, you said when you spoke about vision and imagination, you spoke about having heroes in life.
Yeah.
Correct? If when you mean heroes, it's obviously to understand how other people in the same field or industry or domain have lived life. Therefore, does it mean that they have to read more biographies, autobiographies, listen to podcasts? What tools would you give them? Resources?
So I want to pull back a bit about my true compass. Okay, and then I'll come back to the biographies, right? So the reason I think my true compass works beautifully, okay, is it actually tells you about your purpose, right? So you just go back and rank your purpose there. It just says, okay, what's my purpose? So I know my purpose is career, then that's great. So you know, at least I want to build a reputation and a success in the professional area that I've chosen to work on. That's really what it allows you to identify, right? Then it also maps and tells you what are your strengths, seemingly the way you do things today. What are the things that you are good, you seem to be good at, right? And therefore, what can you build further on, right? So that it gives a good perspective, and that's really the section around the mindset. Okay, and then you have the section around the practice, saying that if you're good at this, are you putting them to practice, right? So it just is almost like a diagnostics, if you were to call it, saying, is my purpose, mindset, and practice aligned, and am I leveraging them enough? That's really what I think my true compass does. It's almost like a mirror where you look at it and then say, am I taking advantage of what I'm good at, and am I doing it to the best of my ability every day, and can I get better at it?
Correct.
Right? So that, I think, is really what my true compass does. So therefore, when you have a job versus a career mindset, and when you want to build this pivot from moving from a job lens to a career lens, it's always good to start looking at saying, okay, where do I stand today? And therefore, what do I need to do to build professional and career success? My true compass is like a springboard to get there. That's really what I think my true compass does. And I would sincerely urge people to go back and take my true compass, because it just gives them some kind of a diagnostics about themselves.
Right.
And very often we don't spend time, doing a diagnostics.
I've never heard of career diagnostic as a...
Yeah.
As something
So that's
that
really what I think my true compass does. Now, answering your second question, what are the tips and tricks that you're talking about? You're talking about heroes, right? So therefore, reading biographies, listening to great achievers is one way of observing and learning from them. Okay. Let me give you a couple of things that I do, right? Which probably many others can add as a part of the comments, and they can share it as a part of the community. One of the books that I think really gives very good insights is Poor Charlie's Almanac, which is Charlie Munger's book, and it's a fantastic insight of life lessons that he's learnt, right? And it's a fantastic way of reflecting whether you are doing things in a templated manner, or are you observing, immersing yourself, and are you doing it out of intent, and is there a deep learning around which you are implementing things, right? That's a great book to read. The other one I would suggest is a book called Not for Bread Alone. It's the life story, and he talks about the philosophy of Matsushita, right?
Okay.
And again, a beautiful book where I think the title itself is so beautiful, right? Not for bread alone.
Correct.
Right? And that's really almost like a job mindset,
Correct.
right? So if you want to build a company like Matsushita, right, then you need a different mindset, which is really about a career mindset. And that, I think, is a great example of learning what does it take to actually pivot from a job versus a career mindset.
Got it.
That, I think, is a interesting example for us to take, right? The other one is, if you want to listen to some podcasts, I'm sure Founders Podcasts
Right.
is a great repository. It's got brilliant, I would say, anecdotes. What did it take for these people to achieve what they did? And and Founders Podcast takes great founders, great company builders, and their life story is mapped so beautifully, and there are life lessons that you can pick up. And each of those life lessons are something that you will be able to resonate and look back and then say, hey, I can apply some of these principles to what I do today.
Correct.
So I would say these are the three resources that you could start off with. I could give many more, but I would say start with this, and doing it in a disciplined manner every day is something that's very, very important.
Correct. So, because that would probably fall under lifelong learning when you say discipline, because it's lifelong learning requires some kind of rigor.
Exactly.
And that rigor can be only fed by curiosity. It can only
Yeah.
be fed by some kind of hunger that you have. And like you said, that neatly ties back to the fact that if you see, lifelong learning is not that you just pick up any book and read whatever you want and say that you learn something from it. It has to, when we, especially from the professional career focus, once, like you said, you have a portfolio of skills, then your lifelong learning is oriented through your portfolio of skills. Once you know what your skills are, once you're aware of those strengths of yours, then you start attracting resources and knowledge to enhance that. Correct?
Absolutely. See, I'll give you an example, Ashwin. So when I started getting into marketing, right, I had a lot of choices, right? I had a choice probably to work for a large multinational bank, but I did not take that up as an option, though it was a high-paying job. Okay, I decided to move into marketing, which was a slightly, if not relatively low-paying job. But I decided that I want to be in marketing. That's the first decision that I took. Okay, so that's a career decision, not a job decision. Okay, then I ended up working in an agency, marketing agency, started growing there. But within that, I said, okay, should I be in the mass media business, or should I be in the say a database marketing business, okay, which is really CRM and stuff like that. And I decided to take up CRM, which is really a niche even in the marketing skill that was required. Therefore, I decided to specialize in, say, CRM, database marketing kind of area, right? So then I started working on a niche, and therefore the niche then started helping me further build my expertise, right? So therefore, if you ask me, I used to read biographies of Lester Wonderman called Being Direct, okay, which is something that I read, and I used to look at Drayton Bird as my hero, right? So therefore, I had my heroes there. Drayton Bird has written a book called Common Sense Direct Marketing, which is something that it's a Bible for me, right? Therefore, I started doing all of that, and then I started building expertise, right? But as I was doing that, I was realizing that the world was changing to technology, right? And marketing was increasingly becoming data-driven and technology-driven, right? Which is when I moved to taking up technology-related initiatives in marketing. Therefore, digital marketing, That's really the area that I started pursuing and got interested. So every 5 years, I would say I would disrupt myself, saying, hey, can you become comfortable by being uncomfortable? That's another important career mindset that you need to build. So you need not do the same thing over and over again. You need to look at what's your professional, I would say, trend in your industry. Where is it moving? Look at which areas you need to really take a bet on. Okay, that's really where you talked about this whole thing of having the courage and the risk that you need to take, right? Therefore, I picked up technology in marketing to be my core. I would call it the next pivot, right? And therefore, moved into analytics, martech, technology. That's really how I moved, right? And then I said, okay, can I do a startup? Therefore, I did my startup. But everything was in marketing, and that's really how I progress. And therefore, the fact that I was hands-on, I was able to learn and do as I grew with experience is very, very important. And that, I think, is a career mindset. And I was not looking at it only as a job.
Correct.
That, I think, is key.
Correct. I think there was a very powerful phrase you said, disrupt yourself.
Yeah.
That, very powerful thing to us to process, like you said, career diagnostic. The first thing should be, how can you disrupt yourself? Because your competition is you. When it comes to a career,
and after some time in your career, appraisals don't matter.
Correct.
Promotions don't matter.
Correct.
It's about you having a beginner's mindset as you grow in experience. Right? So you need to start looking at it and saying, am I good at what I'm doing? Nobody is going to tell you you're good or bad. You need to have a compass, which is really why we call the product that we have today as My True Compass.
Correct.
Right? Therefore, it's very hard to have a realistic view of your skills, your capabilities, and then working towards improving them. Right? Therefore, My True Compass is the bedrock of this thinking. And that's really where this whole thinking around job and career is so important and so fundamental that if you want to pivot to a career approach to professional success, then My True Compass is a bedrock of where you can start. And some of the tips and tricks that I spoke to you is about starting to do it. So for example, if you go back to the Contramind Code, which is the newsletter that we publish every week, it's I think for 169 weeks we have done it, right? Which means that it's more than 3.5 years every week. What we read, what we listen, what we watch, what's our reflection, and what's our learning been, right? Therefore, that's really how we have moved. So, which means that you're putting it to practice and you're doing it in a disciplined manner. And I would say there is a compounding effect of learning, and therefore, that's how careers are built. In finance, they talk about the fact that SIP does a compounded way in which your wealth grows, right? Similarly, in career, there is a compounded learning effect of how you keep incrementally learning, and that has a multiplier effect on your career.
Correct.
I think that's really what is key. Therefore, My True Compass is a bedrock, and therefore, don't look at what you're doing as a job. Have an imagination and aspiration on the larger career that you want to build, and then prepare yourself with a portfolio of skills that you want to work on over the career span that you will be around. That's very, very important, and that, I think, is the starting point.
Fantastic. Yes, that answers the question very well. To summarize what we discussed understanding professional success through the lens of having a job versus through the lens of having a career. We discussed having a job approaching it through a job lens has a self-limiting belief. You feel complacent, you lose relevance, you have blind spots. But at the same time, if you have a career, you need to you build vision, you build imagination, you build aspiration, you build courage, and you build lifelong learning. Fantastic. So before we meet next week for the next question that I have, which I will reveal only next week, I have one rapid fire question for you, because you said disrupt yourself. My rapid fire question to you is, in the last 5 years, how have you disrupted yourself?
I never thought, Ashwin, that I'll be doing a podcast. Right? If you ask me, I come from a background where I'm not a convent-educated student. Am I extremely good in my communication skills? I would say on a rating of 1 to 5, I would say I'm at 2. Right? But I decided to say, I will make my mistakes. I will ensure that I'll put up my vulnerabilities to the outside world, and I'll keep improving. So I've disrupted myself completely, and I'm learning through the process. Maybe in my 100th episode I'll be as good as somebody else, but clearly I'm happy to make mistakes. And again, this method of learning is really what I'm disrupting myself. And I know I have weaknesses, and I'm willing to live and make this visible to others, and yet I'll keep improving. That's really how I'm disrupting myself.
Okay, Swami, thank you so much for this week. We answered the question of a job versus career. Until we meet next week, take care and stay safe. Bye, Swami.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Swami.
Thanks for listening to this episode. For selected links and detailed show notes, visit www.contraminds.com. Follow ContraMinds on social media and let us know who you would like to see next on the podcast. If you're listening to ContraMinds on Apple Podcasts, do share your comments and give us a rating. We are keen to know what you're thinking. ContraMinds is also on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and stay up to date on all our releases. Thanks for listening and stay safe.